The JSC has recommended Supreme Court President Mandisa Mannya to be the next Chief Justice of South Africa. Let's explore this now and get some legal analysis, of course, with Advocate Modidima Mannya, who is going to be giving us his sense on whether or not the JSC did a good job this week, as we saw those interviews and they were being televised, of course, some of them lasting just short of 12 hours. Advocate, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Looking back at the interviews, do you think the JSC did a good job?
Well, I think it's a good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. Look, I think we're sitting in a bit of a difficult situation where it's clear that the nation is divided. If you look at the various views that have been propagated in the public domain, there's a great measure of concern about the performance of the JSC. This, of course, viewed against the background that there was previously litigation which resulted in a process of the JSC having to be rerun. So it seems like the situation may have not improved as expected.
Some say that the chair appeared to not be in control of his meeting at times. Would you agree with that, or do you say that he simply did what he could under the circumstances?
Well, I think it goes beyond the chair. It also includes how everyone who is a member of the JSC and who was part of the proceedings was expected to do. One of the things that one would have expected is that people go and exercise the requisite level of decorum instead of deferring to the chairperson. At the same time, you would have an expectation that the chairperson must put his foot down and ensure that things that are not supposed to happen do happen. I must say that bear in mind that in that meeting, there were members of parliament, there were legal practitioners, there were judges, and you would have expected at a high level like that you would find a better sense of behavior.
And especially when you look at that exchange, between EFF leader Julius Malema, of course, in his capacity there as commissioner, and Minister Lamola as well. And that was really one of those moments that really got quite heated.
Yes, it doesn't really send a good message. You must bear in mind that both of them are actually members of parliament, one being a leader of a party, the other one also doubling up as a minister. And you do not expect people at that level, even if they have very serious differences, to behave in the manner that they did. And I think that is the point I'm making, that, and you would have seen that the chair tried to intervene, and even earlier on when he asked Mr. Malema to moderate his voice, and you would have seen how the response was. And I think the expectation should be on each and every one of them to behave in a manner that sort of inspires public confidence.
Let's then look at, this particular aspect of it, because there have been concerns that have been raised about some of the questions that were asked of these particular candidates. But while there were these uncomfortable questions at times that were asked, especially when you look at even some of the gender questions, asking whether or not if South Africa is ready for, a woman chief justice, there's also much to be said, though, about those who kept quiet when some of these questions and bizarre questions that continue to follow were being asked. Would you agree as well?
Yes, and I think we must distinguish between robustness, and there must be robust engagement and debate. But we must also define what constitutes an uncomfortable question. I don't think you can classify a sexist question like whether women are ready to be leaders as an uncomfortable question. It's an utterly sexist question. And we should never even expect a forum of that nature to allow those type of questions to be asked. I mean, as I said, and I strongly believe it was an extremely insulting question, I think Justice Mannya suffered an injustice to have to answer that type of question. She's already a leader of the Supreme Court of Appeal. If there was anybody who had even doubt, even if we give that person the benefit, why would that person have doubt when in front of you is a president of the Supreme Court of Appeal? What is the difference? Because that is the second highest court. If Justice Mannya were to be appointed, she would just be moving one level up. It's not like she's coming from a magistrate Court to the Constitutional Court. So I think we must distinguish between uncomfortable questions and utterly unacceptable questions like sexist questions. The same, you would not expect that somebody would come and confront a candidate with gossip and rumor and make the responsibility to the candidate to refute a rumor and gossip when we know that if there was such conduct, there are specific procedures in law that had to be followed. So I think that the total picture for me is not encouraging.
Listening to what you're saying, Advocate Mannya, about, a candidate being confronted with rumors and left to him to then, provide the proof here, I suppose you are talking about the sexual harassment questions that were asked of Judge President Dunstan Mlambo. Am I correct?
Yes, correct. But also remember they were basically, and I think it's gossip because I don't think there's any substance or any facts were presented. Two judges were effectively confronted with the story of them doing the bidding or being seen to be more amenable to President Ramaphosa. I mean, there should have been evidence, because if that is the case, those are very serious allegations. Those two judges would have contravened the Constitution. They would not be eligible. But at the same time, it may create an impression that they are part and parcel of a scheme of the president, which means that it also implicates the president. And I'm simply saying, if that be the case, then evidence, cogent facts ought to have been placed on the table, so we don't deal with innuendo and suggestions.
And I wonder then, especially because you are in the legal fraternity yourself, you're in the profession, the judge president saying that there's rumor mongering there's also gossip. I wonder where such rumors could be emanating from to be put to him, even getting to this particular point.
Well, I think the fact that the question that was put to him or the suggestions were put to him were actually the product of rumor and gossip. That's what it was. And I think when he made that point, that very question explained and justified his assertion that there's a lot of rumor and gossiping. Remember, he did indicate that he received a call from a retired judge from the Western Cape about the same thing. So this judge also seemed to have heard this rumor, and the judge seems to have taken it so seriously that he deemed it necessary to phone the Justice Mlambo to ask him about it. I mean, that really, it tells it's a matter of grave concern, I must say.
And, Advocate Mannya, there's also some, in the public domain who are saying that politicians should not be involved in this particular process. It should simply be left to the legal fraternity, be it academics, be it lawyers, be it anyone who is within this particular fraternity, to be able to then conduct these interviews and ultimately make these recommendations to the president. Would you agree with the sentiment that the politicians do not need to sit in the JSC?
No. I think that is a bit of a misinformed proposition. The people who we call politicians, who sit on the Judicial Service Commission, are actually members of parliament. So they are not like a politician that sits somewhere here, runs a party outside of a constitutional framework. For me, it is not about whether politicians or members of parliament should be there, but it's the question of whether everyone who sits in the Judicial Services Commission understands that they are exercising public power, that they are performing a statutory function, that they have to conduct themselves in accordance with our constitutional values. For instance, I think the issues that have been raised in the Judicial Service Commission in this interview process must actually be fully investigated before the president even takes a decision. I'm concerned now if two judges were confronted with allegations that there are judges who are doing the bidding for the president because of the judgments that they made. When there's a process to deal with any concerns arising out of a judgment, and these were allowed to become part of the interview process, then there's something very wrong. And we need to establish whether indeed these two judges are actually amenable to the president and whether the president is involved. Because if that be the case, these are very serious allegations. They can't just be ignored because they happened within the context of an interview. So for me, saying the question is, if there is a judge of the Supreme Court of Appeal sitting there and a sexist question is asked, doesn't that judge have a duty to say, not here, I'm not going to be part of this? Doesn't the member of parliament or the speaker who sits there have a duty to say, I am not going to be party to that? The same will apply to a legal practitioner who's there, who knows that such a question is actually offensive. So the question whether it's a politician or not is neither here nor there. The question is whether the people who sit there appreciate the nature and scope of their responsibility to ensure that the process is conducted in a fair and just manner.
It's going to be interesting to see because from what you're saying, even Judges Matter saying that the criteria needs to really be looked into very closely here, saying that there should be guidelines for some of these questions. But we have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your time. That was Advocate Modidima Mannya, who is a legal expert.